Hi, I'm Taylor from So What Box, and in this video, we're going to learn how to make this awesome shopping tote. Now, this cool shopping tote is lined, and it has cool handles that are made a little bit different than the standard handles on a shopping tote, which makes it a little fun. Plus, it has this nice false bottom that is just made by folding. There's no cutting or triangle sewing on the corners like a normal bottomed bag. And yet when you put a bunch of goods in there, it can pop out and become very roomy and spacious. So this is going to be a fun project. If you are sewing off of the pattern, there are 3 sizes: small, regular, and extra large. The pre-cut project, if you're working off of that you got, is the regular size. Now, all of the steps for all 3 sizes are exactly the same, except for one measurement in one of the steps. So, we are going to use the same tutorial steps in this video for all 3, the small, the regular, and the extra large. And then when we get to the part where the measurement is different for the extra large, we're just going to let you know in the video that if you are making the extra large, you will need to use the other measurement. So hopefully that isn't too confusing, and then you don't have to be scrolling through hours of film. You can just watch one tutorial, learn how to do it, and make any size that you want. Also remember, there are written instructions printed on the printed pattern, so once you follow one video tutorial, you can just remind yourself how it goes with the written instructions. Okay guys, let's get started. Now, getting started, if you have the items from your pre-cut kit, you will see that you have 2 separate pieces of webbing or belting, and this is for our handles. If you are making this without the pre-cut kit, you will have one length of belting as per the cutting directions. Go ahead and fold it in half and cut it so that there are 2 equal lengths. Then we can set aside these fabrics because we're first going to finish sewing these handles. And what we're going to do is fold these in half, hot dog style, so matching the long ends here. And we're just going to put the pins in this going the length of this, matching these long ends. Once we have these pinned, we are going to sew the length of these along the raw edges that we matched, and we are going to start 3 inches from each edge. So I'm going to measure up 3 inches from this edge. I'm actually going to move my first pin to there, and then I'm going to measure 3 inches from this edge, move my first pin to there, and I'm only going to sew in between these pins. This will make a cool handle shape handle when we are done. Remember to reverse stitch when you begin and end this so that this won't unravel as we use the handle. Now it's time to check and make sure that there's no part along here where we missed the other side. It looks like I did get this sewn correctly. If you do see that you missed sewing a part of this and there's a hole in here, you can just fold it again, go back and stitch along here again a little bit further away from the edge than you did to begin with. But here you can see it's starting to look like a fancy bag handle. Now we need to do that with this next one. Now we're going to set these aside and work with our lining piece. The lining is going to be the fabric that is on the inside of the bag. So this is going to be the fabric that you don't want to see on the outside of your bag. Now we're going to fold this in half with the right sides together, matching these short ends. And once those are matched, we're going to pin down these sides here, but only about halfway down, because we are going to need to do some fancy folding at the bottom that I'll show you in a second. But we need to make sure that these sides are pinned so that we don't accidentally move around the sides while we're doing our fancy folding on the bottom. So that's just going to hold everything all nice and secure while we focus down here. Now down here, we need to make a mark about 2 inches up from this bottom fold. If you are making the extra large bag, which is not your pre-cut kit, but is in the printed pattern, instead of a 2-inch mark, you will make a 3-inch mark. All the rest of the steps are going to be the same. So we're going to mark at 2 inches, and we're going to make it so that we have a mark on the top and the bottom piece of fabric here. So now I have a pin at 2 inches on both the top and the bottom piece of fabric, not through both. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. 2 inches up, put a pin in the top piece of fabric and the bottom piece of fabric. Now, we want to fold this to the inside here. So we're going to fold like this. So I just made a fold at the back mark. See, I'm pulling this top mark up and folding at this bottom mark here that we made on the bottom piece of fabric. We're going to fold that across. Use a pin to put about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch up from this fold, just to hold that in place. And then we are going to fold this back over and smooth it down. Now this should match at the bottom here. This fold edge should match this fold edge, and those should be on the same line as these pins here. If that's so, we're going to take and pin through all layers of fabric here to hold this together. Now what we're doing here is creating a false bottom for our bag. When the bag is used, it can pooch out like this, but when it's flat and folded, it can lay flat and take up less space. So once this is all pinned together, we can sew along this edge and this edge. Now, if you would like, you can press the stitch line that we just made in order to get it to lie flat and set those stitches. And then we are going to set this aside and do much the same thing with our main piece of fabric. Now, we are going to fold this again with the right sides together, matching the top short edges, and then we're going to pin down these sides about halfway, just like we did with the lining piece. Now we are going to come down here to this bottom fold, and we're going to measure up 2 inches and make a mark. We're going to put a pin at 2 inches, but in this case, put it through both pieces of fabric to hold both pieces together. Then we'll do the same thing on this other end. Measure up 2 inches and then put a pin at the 2-inch mark, pinning both pieces of fabric together. Now for this one, if you are doing the extra large bag, again, instead of measuring 2 inches, you will measure 3 inches. The extra large bag is not the one that you received in your pre-cut project kit, but it is an option in the printed pattern. Okay, now instead of putting this and folding it up inside like we did the lining, we are going to instead just fold this whole thing up with this bottom fold, this fold being at the point where our pin is. And then we can move that pin up here to go through all 4 layers of fabric. Make sure that this side is folded at that pin mark as well. Then move the pin up here to all 4 layers of fabric to hold this together. Now we are going to sew down both sides with our 1/2 inch seam allowance. Remember to reverse stitch at the beginning and end of your stitch line. Now we can press this stitch line to make it lie flat and set those stitches. Now we are going to open this top section here so that we can see the right side of our fabric. We're also going to grab our handles, and we are going to pin the raw edge of these handle pieces to this raw top edge of our bag. Now we want to measure 3 inches in from the edge, 1, 2, 3, and put our handle piece, raw edge, on the 3-inch mark. We want to make sure that this section here that has the fold, not the section that we sewed with the 2 raw edges, but the folded end is facing down towards the bag when we pin this on. Now I'm going to use 2 pins so that this doesn't twist on me. So 1 pin on both sides of this strap. Now we're going to measure in 3 inches from this side and put this raw edge here as well. Now you want to make sure that you don't have it twisted when you bring it up over here. Make sure that you pull this out straight and then bend around. We'll pin this in place. Make sure that we're only pinning it through this one side of the bag. Then we're going to open the bag and put the handle inside. Now we can lay this flat, and instead of measuring again for this one, we are going to just match to where we pinned the other one. That way everything is even if our measurement was a little off. Now we're going to turn this over so that we can open this and see the side that's not been pinned to. And remember, we want this folded side down towards the bag. So I'm going to put this in here and fold this flat from the edge down on this and pick it up and see where these 2 straps are. Then I'm going to use that to adjust the strap that I'm still pinning right now, right or left, so that it matches where I pinned the first one. Then I'll open this up and put 2 pins in it. Now, if you prefer, you can measure in 3 inches again, just like we did on the other side, but I always find it nicer in case my measurement is a little off to just lie this flat, check it out, make sure that they line up in the same spot. That way one side of your bag isn't crooked from the other side when you try to use it. Now we're going to pull this straight, make sure I don't have any twists in it, put it inside the bag, and pull it up over here to this side and do the same thing. Lie this down flat and adjust this over to where it needs to be in order to match the one that I pinned on the other side. And then pin that in place. Now you can see that we have both straps pinned in place here and tucked into the inside of the bag. Now we are going to put the lining piece inside this piece. We need to make sure the right sides match, so we need to turn this lining piece right side out. Now we can put this whole thing in here. And as you can now see, the right side of the fabric is matching the right side of the fabric. Now we're going to start by pinning these side seams together so that we know that we are in the right place around the top. So we're going to find a side seam on this lining and a side seam here. We're going to match up the seam line and this top edge. We're matching this top raw edge here and put a pin in place to hold that there. Now we're going to come around to the other side and we'll match these side seams and match the top, and we'll pin this in place. Now we're going to kind of hold on to these 2 spots, shake it around to get this to lie all flat like we see now. And then we're just going to move along here and put a couple more pins to hold this so that these raw edges stay lined up with each other as we sew. Now, if you find that you get to this step and the top of the lining piece and the top of the outside piece are not quite the same size, you can put your fingers in the corners and pull a little, and that should stretch the fabric just enough to make everything the same size. Just in case your 1/2 inch seam allowance was a little bit off, sometimes just pulling on those fabrics will make them lay nice and flat so that you can easily go around and pin these. Now that we have this pinned all the way around, we are going to sew with our 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around here, except we need to leave a hole so that we can turn this right side out. So I'm going to leave a hole in between 2 of the strap pieces. Make sure that you sew over every strap end that we have on here. Do not leave a hole over where the strap end is, or the strap won't be held onto the bag. So I'm going to sew from before this strap, over the side seam, over this strap, across this edge, over this strap, across the side seam, over this strap, and then be done. That will leave me a hole or a gap in the sewing right here in between these 2 ends of the handle. Now we can reach into the hole that we left and turn everything right side out. Make sure to pull these bottom corners out so they're flat, and here you can see what our folding of the 2 or 3 inches on the bottom did. Here's our bag, here's the bottom. Here you can see the false bottom. Pretty cool little false bottom. Now once we have this all turned right side out, we're going to take our lining and put into this bag. So we're just going to push it down in there, and you can see it's now starting to look more like a bag than it did before. That's good. We're going to come on over to our iron, and we're going to fold this so that the stitch line is right on the edge here. Then we're going to use our iron to press this flat so that you don't see any of the lining from the outside and you don't see any of the outside from the lining side. When we get to the hole that we left, we are going to go to both sides, grab it so that the stitch line where we began and ended is at the very end of the fold here, and just pull. And you can see this automatically puts all these raw edges towards the inside and makes these line up nice, straight, and flat. Then we'll use our iron to help hold these folds in place. And we're also going to put a couple pins in here for when we go and sew this together. Once you've made it all the way around your bag and everything is pressed nice and flat, you can see it's starting to look a lot more like a nice bag. Now the finishing touch is going to be to top stitch around this top edge, and that's going to do 2 things. First, that's going to hold it so that the inside always stays on the inside, and it's going to hold this nice flat crease up here. If we wash it or anything like that, it's not going to make us have to iron the top to be even again. And it's going to keep us from having to hand stitch this hole closed, because we're going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge here. That's going to be way closer to the edge than our raw edges that are in here. That means that it's going to keep all the raw edges on the inside and close this all together without the need to hand stitch. Make sure that when you sew this, you have the handles out this way as you sew, so that you don't accidentally sew them like this and pointed down.